evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Russia says it has detained 8 people in connection with Saturday's explosion on a key bridge linking Russia to Crimea. Its FSB security service said 5 of those held were Russians, while the others were Ukrainian and Armenian. It says Kyiv was behind the attack, but a Ukrainian official described Russia's investigation as nonsense. The news came as explosions were reported in the Ukrainian cities of Kherson, Zaporizhia and Nikopol. Video released by the State Emergency Service of Ukraine shows the moment emergency workers rescued a family from rubble after a rocket attack in Zaporizhia. Ukraine's military said its troops were continuing their advance in the region, capturing another 5 towns. Pope Francis has once again condemned what he called Russia's relentless bombings of Ukrainian cities, saying the attacks had unleashed a hurricane of violence on residents. Speaking to thousands of people at his weekly general audience in St. Peter's Square, he also appealed to those who have the fate of the war in their hands to stop. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that major leaks, which suddenly erupted in the Nord Stream gas pipelines running from Russia to Europe, were an act of international terrorism. Putin said the attacks on the pipelines, which Europe and Western governments have called sabotage, set a dangerous precedent. In a speech at an energy forum in Russia, he also said Russia had nothing to do with sky-high energy prices that Europeans are facing this winter, and blamed the West for stoking a global energy crisis. Striking French oil workers have voted to continue their industrial action, which has led to shortages at fuel stations across the country. They responded angrily after the government said it would use mandatory powers to force some of them to go back to work. The strike, in its 3rd week, has shut 6 of France's 7 oil refineries, with long queues of cars now a regular sight at the pumps. The government wants to get the fuel flowing again. Nearly a third of French petrol stations are now reported to be running short of at least one kind of fuel. Families of victims and survivors of the deadly 2002 Bali bombings have held a minute's silence at the Australian Consulate General in Denpasar to mark the 20th anniversary of the attacks.
We will now hold a minute's silence to reflect on and remember the lives lost and those injured in the Bali bombings. Thank you.
Australian consulate staff, families of victims and survivors attended the ceremony in Bali while officials placed floral wreaths.
Guys, this is horrendous. I've never seen anything like it. It's huge, it's scary.
88 Australians died in the attacks, which were blamed on the Al-Qaeda-linked jihadist network based in Indonesia.
There's people dead, there's everything.
The 2 almost simultaneous blasts on Bali's Kuta Strip in 2002 killed a total of 202 people and devastated the resort island's tourism industry. Spain is marking its national holiday with a military parade attended by the king and his family. King Felipe VI inspected the troops and waved to crowds which lined the streets in Madrid. The day is marked across the country, with most people taking the day off work. There was also a flypast before a paraglider landed holding the Spanish flag. The day is significant in Spain as it is the anniversary of when Christopher Columbus, who was sponsored by Spain's Catholic monarchs, discovered America. And the 4th edition of the Street Child World Cup has kicked off in Doha with the participation of children coming from 25 different countries. Football teams from around the globe, representing some of the world's most vulnerable children, took part in the tournament. Traditionally held in the host countries of the FIFA World Cup, previous tournaments have been organised in Russia in 2018, Brazil in 2014 and South Africa in 2010. This year's edition will be held at Qatar Foundation's Education City. It will feature 15 boys teams and 13 girls teams, with 10 of the teams being represented by refugee or displaced children.
And football unifies us. And when these young people play for their country at a World Cup, where the World Cup is, people back home listen. And people back home get on their side, and then people back home change things for them.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.